I bet I could switch heel onto that mani-ped, big spin out, tray flip that gap, 5-0 the rail, drop into the bowl, stale fish into a Christ air, and then we all get f***ing cracked.
Okay, Rick and Morty had hyper-intelligent skateboarding dinosaurs, and it was actually pretty cool. Let me explain. I feel like Rick and Morty is always at its peak when it shows us crazy global sci-fi events unfolding that Rick and Morty just happen to be a part of, or like forced to intervene in. Classic episodes like Get Swifty. Basically, anytime the president's involved, you know it's gonna be one of my favorites. And this week was no different, being one of the most out-of-pocket episodes I've seen in a minute, as well as giving us some pretty heavy lore stuff that moved the story forward quite a bit. Portal travel's back, I guess. Officially. We'll get into that later. But first, what happened in the episode? Basically, the episode opens with Morty just trying to go to school, because despite everything he's been through, I guess he still wants to get a standard public school American education. But I'm not judging. Our boy's very studious. I'm proud of him. Rick tries to take him using portal technology, but admittedly, it's not all the way there yet, leading to Rick having to drive him to school. I don't know where his ship is at this point. They use it later in the episode, but just seeing Rick behind the wheel, hands at 10 and 2, it just feels so weird and off-putting. This season has truly humbled him. Morty gets to school where everyone is understandably terrified of his presence because everywhere he goes, some crazy sci-fi tomfoolery happens to follow. And that's literally exactly what happens. Now, we all know Rick and Morty is not shy with its movie parodies, and these aliens that show up really give me some Arrival vibes, down to the shape of their ship, to the fact that they show up all over the world. Definitely feels like a nod to that movie. In a crazy twist, these ships turn out to be not aliens, but dinosaurs, and not the ones we're used to seeing on Earth. They're far from Jurassic Park. It turns out that dinosaurs actually conquered the world themselves and left Earth willingly, going off into space and becoming a hyper-intelligent utopian race that helped civilizations all over the universe. They finally returned to Earth and are noticeably unhappy with what humans have done to it, citing the amount of Marvel movies we made as a key reason, which I just thought was like a funny dig. Judging by the state of the MCU right now, they're not wrong. But because they're super hyper-intelligent, they're not violent, and instead relieve humans from their duties and positions of power and basically just take over the world for them, creating a utopian society where nobody has to work, there's no war, there's no famine, and generally just bringing some world peace. Essentially turning everybody into Jerry. Realizing his untapped potential, Jerry prints his manifesto about how you should never try and do nothing, which is pretty hilarious. Meanwhile, the president is unhappy with this new state of the world, claiming that it's boring, and enlists the help of Rick to get rid of them. Rick makes a deal with the president that he will as long as he gets to host the Oscars, which is just a super Rick thing to do. But when he goes to try and get rid of them, he's only met with kindness. The dinosaurs even giving him a brand new working portal gun. One that's arguably way better than Rick's, where you can actually see through the portals. And this is the first time we've seen any other being outside of Rick have portal technology, so this is kind of crazy. Again, we're starting to see some cracks in the whole smartest man in the multiverse shtick. Determined to find some dirt on these seemingly perfect dinosaurs, Rick goes on a mission to visit all of the societies that they've quote-unquote helped. This leads to my favorite bits of the episode, where we see other alien planets try to interpret dinosaurs in the same backwards way we have, stitching together bones and creating wildly inaccurate speculations. However, Rick makes a startling discovery when he realizes that every planet the dinosaurs go to gets hit with a massive meteor, just like on Earth. Rick reveals that this is actually a sentient species that has evolved in tandem with the dinosaurs, except in the opposite direction. It's kind of crazy Rick and Morty math, but it works. The dinosaurs feel so bad. The dinosaurs do a press tour, which I thought was pretty funny, and actually leave the planet in shame, like they're not bad guys. In fact, they just go straight to Mars and are determined to be taken out by the meteor once and for all so that there's no more life lost. But Rick, in his ultimate pettiness, doesn't want them to go out that way, so he goes to Mars with them and eventually calls their bluff, in turn saving the dinosaurs. So yeah, Rick saved the dinosaurs. Pretty cool. Though the most important part of this episode happens at the very end, when the dinosaurs decide to return the favor to Rick and end up closing the space rift that was opened at the beginning of the season, and referenced pretty constantly throughout the episode. Rick was obviously upset because he was planning on fixing that himself and made a joke about getting like a 3-episode arc out of it, but now it's just fixed. This looming threat is just gone. And by the end of the episode, Rick finally fixed portal technology. Thank God. It took him way too long. And he goes on a classic Rick and Morty garage rant, talking about all of the classic adventures they're gonna go on now that portal technology is fixed. Sidebar, these green spikes are super sick. I think this is the first time we've seen them. I love this show's design so much. Anyways, okay. So yeah, as goofy as this episode was, it was pretty major in terms of moving the story forward, and we finally got resolution to most of the major problems of this season. It was pretty big. So what do we make of all this? Well, let's start with the first question. Is the Central Finite Curve closed for good? No way. For starters, both co-creators, Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon, have confirmed in interviews that we've not seen the last of Evil Morty. The Finite Curve may be closed for now, but Evil Morty can't return if he's locked out. This pre-existing confirmation assures us that the curve is going to crack once more, and I don't think Evil Morty is going to break back in when his whole plan revolved around him getting out. I think it's likely that Rick's spite and his need for conflict will be the driving force next time this happens. He didn't even want the Central Finite Curve fixed, and definitely not by a Deus Ex dinosaur. And damn it, he's going to fix it himself. Now let's be real. Rick fucking with the fabric of space-time and smashing open another rift for the sole purpose of fixing it himself and preserving his ego isn't exactly far-fetched. In fact, that just sounds like a regular episode of the show.
I had to create a bomb.
What? A bomb?
We're gonna drop it down there and just get a whole fresh start.
Now, I don't think he's literally going to go out of his way to make some high concept machine just to rip it open, but I do think the story will lead to Rick being forced to make a choice, with his decision resulting in the greater multiverse opening back up to the audience. Also, if we're being honest, no matter how much back and forth there is with serialization, Rick and Morty doesn't waste lore. Like, remember the Story Train episode a few years ago that took a jab at multiple storylines at the time, including the Galactic Federation, Bird Person, and Evil Morty? And since then, we've had all of those things followed up on and more. Even if we don't get a morsel of it in Season 6, we could easily explore dimensions beyond the curve in Season 7. I mean, despite it taking years in real life, Evil Morty was only missing for a season after taking over as president. And it's not like they didn't bother giving us anything in that absence, considering they got the whole Space Beth thing rolling at the end of Season 4. But if we're being honest, I do think the Season 7 pickup did create some huge pacing issues for the show's overarching story. Because the first season of that pickup, Season 4, is when viewers really started to have these issues with the show. It's obvious Rick and Morty does have some sort of plan, no matter how loose, but that plan has been stretched out to last for over half a decade. And it's not the plan I think works for a show like this, a show that has proven time and time again that serialization leads to an evolved version of the show that's just, I don't know how else to say it, it's just better. I'm gonna be real tough. I think the writers may have decided to close the rift because they already have a lot to take care of. Rick Prime, Bird Person's daughter, I'm sure they're not done with Space Beth going against the Federation, still not letting go of Squanchy being missing, the list goes on. When you already have so much going on and you don't really plan to touch on going behind the Central Finite Curve anytime soon, why leave a giant hole open for the audience to ask about, just like how people asked about Evil Morty every episode for years? Because the Citadel was just right there. Realistically, I think this move was just them learning their lesson and ensuring the audience focuses on the pieces they want them to focus on instead of the plot points they're obviously saving for later. And when it does happen, it's gonna be sick. Rick mourned that this could have been a whole 3-part story arc, and they could have just milked the riff for canon. And that line just reminded me of the Story Train episode so much. They're teasing us now, but they're gonna deliver later, and it's gonna be fantastic. Not to mention that little teaser for the second half of the season includes 2 new clips that seem to allude to this season ending on a status quo changing multi-part story, which would be awesome. Of course, the rift wasn't the only thing that was patched up in this episode, as the ending saw Rick repair portal travel, which again, at first glance, seems like the show backtracking on the status quo, but upon rewatch, the scene feels really unhinged. Something's definitely off with Rick. You can assume Rick's just sleep deprived and loopy from repairing portal travel all night, but think about the reason why he put himself in that situation in the first place. He said he was putting it off because the more Morty asked, the less he wanted to do it. But as he learned, if he puts things off long enough, someone else is just gonna come and take care of it. These dinosaurs caused Rick to regress out of spite, and I think that's just a part of the season's storyline. I mean, earlier this season, he went out of his way to denounce himself as a god, but he goes back to calling himself a godlike being the second his ego was challenged. And what does he do at the end of this episode after fixing portal travel? He gives a monologue that's eerily similar to the one he usually gives in his season premiere, going on a tangent about classic adventures with crude characters and social commentary, even including throwbacks in the form of Boob World, and pulling out a wacky character from a dimension where hats wear people. These are intentionally reminiscent of seasons 1 and 2. It seems like Rick's going to try to live in bliss and act like everything's normal, but it just won't work. A huge hint of this again comes from the new promo, with one of the 2 new scenes celebrating Summer's 18th birthday, and Rick immediately gaining suspicion of the situation. Why? Because Summer actually aging up means that the status quo is shifting. This season is all about the status quo, and this payoff is going to be insane. Before we wrap it up, one last side note. When it comes to Rick Prime, I do think a part of the reason why Rick put off fixing portal repair was his hope of keeping Rick Prime trapped in his home dimension. But going after him is also representative of Rick holding on to the past. By finally repairing portal travel, he's trying to let go of Rick Prime again. But I don't think it's going to work out in the long run. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But as always, guys, I would love to know what you think about all of this. Do you think Rick seems different this season? Do you think they're leading up to a bigger story? What do you think the finale is going to be? Let us know in those comments down below or tweet to us at Roundtable Vids. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the Roundtable and hit that notification bell to stay in the loop with all things animation. As always, guys, I'm Nemo. This is a Rick and Morty breakdown, and I will see you next time. Peace.